New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
And hello again, dear ones. This is Rev Brz hiding behind the banner here. Good afternoon.
Rev Z right here.
Mitch Austin with you.
And Mitch is our special guest today, folks. We're really grateful he's coming to us all the way from sunny California. Z and I are underneath a winter storm warning at the moment and watching it rain at his place and just be cloudy at mine. But Mitch is bringing the sunshine to us today.
Yes.
And we're grateful that you're with us. Now, Mitch was with us back as part of a special program back in September of last year. I wouldn't expect you to remember, but in case you do, I was at the Affiliated New Thought Network's annual conference and retreat, and Mitch joined us on this program. Alzia was off that week and didn't get to experience Mitch's gifts and all that he's bringing to the world. So we knew we had to have him back. It's taken us a good 6 months to do that because our schedules are so full. But we're really grateful you're here with us today, Mitch. Why don't you fill everybody in? Tell everybody a little bit what they need to know about you and your work in the world.
Well, thank you so much, Rev Brz, and I'm so grateful to be on the show today. I'm a ministerial intern with the Emerson Theological Institute. I've been in the science of mind, well, pretty much my whole life. I was raised with these principles, and I've been an earnest student now for over 16 years. I do quite a bit of speaking in various spiritual centers. I have several classes that I teach that I'll talk a little more about today. And then I also have my own spiritual counseling practice, but we can call it spiritualing if you want. And super excited to be here today and to have a really great conversation. So.
Beautiful. Well, we're grateful that you're with us as well. Z, share a little bit. Well, why don't you get us kicked off with some, or not? Okay, he's getting a phone call.
I'm calling.
That is a bad call.
I ended that. I said, God, I got it. So I just hung up.
Nice.
Perfect. Well, Mitch, one of the questions we love to ask people to get our conversation started and get everything rolling is help us from your perspective. How do you define this ever so crazy word that we call spirituality?
Yeah, to me, it kind of has three parts. It's a belief system, a practice, and an experience of the unseen realm. Right? Spirituality, materiality. Materiality is everything we can see, touch, feel that we call the world. And spirituality has to do with everything in the unseen realm. And that includes what we believe about it, how we practice it and move through it. And and how we experience it viscerally in our being, in our own inner unseen spirit. To me, that's spirituality.
Yeah, and I like that because that brings in the whole, as we know now very well, the whole quantum world, right? The quantum world is the unseen world. It's experienced by experience, if you will, banging two particles together that you can't see. And when I like that definition because it allows you to really, when you put the quantum piece in it, allows you to really understand that there are definitely things that you don't see that have an effect.
Yes. Yeah.
And that when you put yourself in a certain relationship to them, certain things will not may happen, will happen. And so then the question in my mind becomes, in this definition as you gave so eloquently, is how do I begin to, as Ernest Helms says, how do I begin to use it?
Beautiful. And that is pretty much a great lead into our second question that we always like to ask people is, well, what from your experience, Mitch, because spirituality is that unseen piece, but it's different for everyone. And we all approach it from a different set of practices. So that's what we like to find out about our guests as well. What practices do you recommend when someone comes to you and wants to deepen their experience of spirituality?
Well, one of the practices that I don't hear people talk a lot about that I know I use constantly is the spiritual practice of contemplation. And in the Catholic tradition, contemplation is a very much used and tool. And this is our communion with the unseen realm, spirit, God, whatever you want to call that higher presence, where we can have a conversation with it. But the conversation that we have when we go into contemplation is not an exercise of the logical mind. It's really almost the opposite. It's standing in the question and allowing your consciousness to be clear of any expected answer and allowing a new thought, a new awareness, a new idea to come in, right? Oftentimes when it comes in, we say it came in from out of the blue, right? But what is the blue really? It's the unseen, it's God, it's spirit, it's this higher presence and order of being. And I use it constantly. And I think we use it much more than we realize, but we can consciously use it to help us make decisions in our life path, to have a deeper understanding of what we might call problems or issues or concerns. And also for me, I use it in my creative process for my classes and workshops all the time. So contemplation, I would highly recommend people explore.
I like to call it the divine download.
Yeah, I like that.
Don't always know where it's coming from, but all of a sudden it's there, and it's like, oh, there's the answer. For me, it happens a lot at like 3 a.m. And then
Why is that?
I lie there in bed until like 5 going, okay, now what do I do with this? And some days maybe I should just get up and do something with this. And then, no, I want to get some more sleep. I'll do something with it later. So.
Yeah. And I like contemplation. I love because I didn't call it that growing up, but growing up in Florida, I would sit in my yard and actually lay in my yard and just watch the clouds go by and just have a conversation, which is a form of contemplation. Just, what ifs and how to's and wherefores. And, we get into some of those places where, as you said, Robert, we get that download by just asking these endless series of questions, and things start to form and boom, drop in.
And as Mitch said, it becomes a conscious practice.
I
think what happens to me in the middle of the night is it's actually a subconscious practice, because I'm not consciously lying there saying, okay, let's have a conversation. It just kind of shows up and unconsciously says, now let's become conscious about it. So there's a little bit of both. But when we and what I'm hearing, Mitch, is to be in that place where we set aside a time in our day, not to read, not to meditate, not to pray, not to vision, but to just be in that space of, well, what if?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I get the 4 a.m. downloads too. And I think that happens because we're at our least point of resistance. we're actually at our most open, right? And I've actually shifted from that resistance to contemplation. I remember I was at work once, I had this problem, I couldn't fix it, I was trying to force the answer, I didn't know what it was, and I got exhausted, and I finally just relaxed and said, help, spirit. And then I just let go of trying to fix it, and then a beautiful solution I couldn't even see dropped right in.
Right. Yeah. And that just reminds me of how many times, and I know I've done it, I've made a declaration that I have lost my keys. And I am so focused on trying to get my keys that I can't see them right in front of me.
Yes.
But when I'm able to, as you say, get out of that too focus zone and open the lens up a little bit, they just it's almost like magic. It's like they just appear out of nowhere, and you're like, who did that? Who put them keys there? Because they weren't there.
I like to use the flashlight on my phone when I can't find my phone.
Yeah.
Wandered around. Where's my phone? I know it's here somewhere. It literally in my hand as I'm saying it.
Yes.
Yeah. Always there.
So in this big conversation of spirituality, one of the other topics we really love to explore is this idea of spiritual bypassing. It's not even an idea; it's reality. So that's one of the other ways that I think is valuable for folks listening is how do you address the issue of spiritual bypassing?
Well, I talk about it a lot when I have a sermon, so I'm often calling all of us out, including myself, about it. But I think primarily the antidote to spiritual bypass is authenticity. Because when we embrace our authenticity, we're not judging what needs to be in our experience as good or bad. It is. And when we're authentic, we're able to be present and real. And it's in that presence and realness that we get the clarity, the support that we need. If a friend asks us how we're doing and we just go, it's all good in God, and we're hiding everything behind the screen and not being real or authentic with our friend, we might not get the support we need. We might not be able to have a meaningful conversation that leads to higher ground. So in spiritual bypassing, we're actually missing oftentimes the medicine that we need because we don't want to appear as if we're thinking a bad thought or we're trying something bad to ourselves. Our dark thoughts, our sad thoughts, our undesirable thoughts are a call to our consciousness to look at something that needs healing. And if we're always spiritually bypassing, we can't do that.
Yeah. I've often thought that that question, how you doing, is truly a bypass setup.
Oh,
because when I ask, I really don't want I don't want the real answer. I don't want to know how you're really doing. I just want to say something that is a salutation, and I want you to tell me that you're doing good, and I want you to tell me that everything's great, because most people are really uncomfortable. And I think this is part of what leads to the problem of spiritual bypass is we operate in a realm where we believe the people we're talking to either can't handle or don't want to handle the truth of what's going on.
Yeah. Right. And so if you go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead. I was just going to throw an anecdote in. I'll wait till you finish.
Oh, okay. So, if people ask me how I'm doing, and if I'm not doing well, I'll say I'm hanging in there and open the door to a conversation. So if you have the psychic bandwidth to go there with me, you can. And if you don't, I'm not offended. But at least I'm not pretending to be something that I'm not.
Yeah. And you just brought up in my mind, my father was a chef, and I can't remember him ever asking me how you doing. His question was, what's cooking? What's cooking? Because something's always cooking. So it could be something good or something bad. So you can't easily your way out of that. It gives you really broader range.
Oh yeah. I just did a talk not long ago on Ernest Holmes, and he on love, actually. And after he lost the love of his life, he was at a Silmar doing a conference, and people were always checking in with him. How you doing? Right? Because they were worried. And his response was beautiful. He said, "I'm leaning on love. I'm leaning on love."
Nice.
I thought it was a beautiful way to show up and to express his experience.
See, now you got me thinking of all these sayings now. You know, my dad would always say, if you ask him how he was doing, he'd say, "Oh, fair to partly cloudy."
Covers it.
Yes.
Oh.
Exactly. Mitch, if you hang out long enough with us, you're going to hear about a million colloquialisms that Elzia's father has taught us over the years. I've learned so much from the man. I never even met him.
Nice.
It's when we get Elzia remembering his dad's sayings, we know we're in a good space here today.
Yes.
Folks, for those that are watching, thanks for being with us. Feel free to comment and join in on the conversation as we go along. Our friend Shea Bird is with us today. She's saying there's no growth in spiritual bypassing, and that's very, very true. We are a philosophy that really encourages people to grow. And I think it's important that we recognize we're a philosophy that doesn't tell you how to grow or what you have to grow into. But because, and that's kind of where we're headed in our next couple of questions is, if we look at New Thought, it can often look, well, awful white. Let's just say it the way it is. And I hear it in so many different communities, in so many different centers, that we're trying to reach a more diverse audience. When you look at that question, how are you a little bit more conscious maybe than maybe in the past, or what do you look at as far as how do we reach a more diverse audience? What does that even mean to reach a more diverse audience?
Yes, it's interesting because I do recognize that many New Thought communities are not only white, but they're cisgendered, which means you identify with the gender assigned at birth. I'm a trans man, so I try to do a little bit of education in whatever circles I'm in around that, and also middle to upper class. So it's a very specific segment of our population that New Thought tends to serve or connect with. But to me, whenever we're looking at diversity of any sort, I think it all starts with trying to achieve sensitivity, an openness, a kind curiosity to understand that we don't know what we don't know. And when we engage in a journey of understanding, we can meet people where they're at. Because if we're not willing to meet people where they're at, it doesn't matter where we want to take them. And I think that that's where the power is engaging in a journey and relationship with diverse populations and being willing to learn new language, new ways of seeing things, new lenses of looking at different people's journey, and not assuming that everyone's experience is like ours, that everyone's value system is like ours, and being open. And when we engage in a kind curiosity to achieve understanding, my experience has been most people are really respectful of that and willing to go on the journey with us. And as that unfolds, then I think that people will lean into some of these concepts of New Thought and the community and feel welcome and connected and like they have a place in our community.
That spawned this idea, and I love Ernest. Ernest always has this use of the garden, seed, soil, plant, right? And the thing that popped into me just then was this whole thing of awareness. We know that if the plant will follow the movement of the sun.
Mm-hmm.
If you put a plant in a window and the sun is in the opposite direction of what it's been growing, it is aware enough to know that my source is in the other direction, and I'm going to start moving in that direction. And so when we can begin to emulate that kind of consciousness, right? To follow the source, to follow that beacon of light and hope and understanding that allows us to be, as you were saying earlier, our true selves, our authentic selves. A lot of that kind of stuff begins to work itself out because we're always going to be in tune. We're always going to, even if we're over, looking left and the sun is to the right, we're going to start making that movement to the right to follow the sun. And I think that's going to be a big thing when we can really get in tune with that.
Well, and I would like to follow up on that because I love that thought process. And when we get even more granular to understand and ask the plant, what is your source? Some plants follow the moon.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to be sensitive to the fact that we may be making an assumption that we think is everybody's experience and be willing to rewrite that in a way that people can receive it through their source, their lens.
That's why I've often believed that just slapping a label on something and saying it's for a specific community really can't work. I've recognized this. We here at New Thought Media Network, we call ourselves a global broadcast network. And that means we're very intentional. We're here to serve anyone on the planet. But that also has awoken with me that realization that what works in Europe, what works in Kenya, what works in South America is not necessarily what works in North America. And this is I've heard it said that New Thought is truly the only original American tradition or religion, if you will. I don't like that word religion very much, but this whole thing was brought up in North America. It all started here, and it's based predominantly in North America. But we go to other countries and we try to overlay what works in Utah or here in Colorado. And in other cultures, it's not going to translate, or it's not possible from a bureaucratic standpoint. And I think the same is true when we start to talk about diverse audiences within even just North America itself. So when we start talking to trans audience, when we start talking to an ally type audience, when we start talking to an audience of color, when we start talking to an indigenous audience, we can't just assume and presume that what's always worked for the middle-aged white guy is going to work for everybody else.
Yeah. And you said the thing about religion, and in this context, I try to keep it separate in the sense I look at it from the concept of theology, spirituality, and religion, or you put them in any order. But theology is, whether people know it or not, everybody has a theology trying to understand and study all there is: God, spirit, infinite source. That's what the theology is. Then we get to, as Mitch said, the spirituality part of it, of how do we begin to form a relationship with this unseen thing, this unseen power that we know exists. However we know it by having some direct experience. And then the religion comes in play by saying, I understand there's a study of this thing, and I know I can experience through spirituality. Now people have formulated religions, which is just a system of practice and rituals to tap into that spirituality, to begin to study God at a deeper level. So I have no problem with somebody having whatever religion they have. As we said, some people use meditation. Mitch says he likes contemplation. Some people use journaling. That's the same thing. We're still trying to get that spirituality and that theological basis to how we navigate the world.
Yeah. You remind me that we, at one point, humanity thought that bloodlettings and leechings were a good idea. And we then realized it doesn't work for everybody. I don't even know that this works for anybody. but it definitely doesn't work for everybody. And we've got to go about our healings in another way. Folks, if you're wondering what you've wandered into here, this is New Thought Today on the New Thought Media Network. My co-host, Reverend Elzia, and I are here every Tuesday. And this week, we're blessed with the presence of Mitch Austin. He's sharing with us. He's a ministerial student at the Emerson Institute, serving the Amani Center in California, and his own ministry. We're going to take a quick break and let a couple of our sponsors say hello. Let everybody else grab a sip of water. We'll be back in just a moment, though. Don't go anywhere. There's a lot more to come on New Thought Today here this Tuesday afternoon. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ricky Byers, and I want you to know that I'm coming to Albuquerque, New Mexico for a concert on April 29th, and it's going to be off the chain. So invite your in-laws, your outlaws, invite everybody. Have everybody come.
Happy birthday, Camp Cedar Ridge. We invite you to come camp and celebrate our first year while in sacred service. May 19th through the 21st, we'll be restoring our beloved meditation labyrinth. Come camp with us for the weekend, and all we'll ask you to cover are the meals. Vegetarian, vegan, and gluten-free options are available. That's the weekend of Friday, May 19th to Sunday, May 21st. You can bring your own tent or act fast and register for one of our glamping tents or bunkhouse beds while supplies last. We do have limited indoor accommodations for an additional fee. Find more details and registration at campcedarridgeor.org/lab.
And we're back with more of New Thought Today here on the New Thought Media Network. I really do, folks, encourage you, if you can, join us at Camp Cedar Ridge in May for the birthday party and labyrinth restoration. We're going to rebuild the labyrinth on that property. And more importantly, this coming Saturday, if you can't be in New Mexico, you can be online. A special one night only event with Ricky Byers live from the Rio Grande Center for Spiritual Living in Albuquerque, New Mexico. You can grab a link on their website. This is not going to be just out there everywhere. We will need you to register to get the link, to get the access, and then it's on a love offering donation. So please plan to join us for that this weekend. All right, guys, we're back in our second segment. And Mitch, this is the place where we kind of like to really dig into the future of what New Thought can be, of how New Thought can support the evolution of humanity, how New Thought really can serve in this mighty vision of building a world that works for all. And we'd love to hear some of your thoughts. What direction do you see New Thought taking as we move forward in life?
So I've been noticing there was one minister in particular, and I don't remember his name, unfortunately, but he had done kind of a bird's eye view of many of the spiritual movements globally. And what he was noticing is a big shift in the way people want to have spiritual community. And I think that's definitely going to impact New Thought as well. And what he was finding is that the hierarchical nature of many spiritual communities is starting to flatten, where people want to have a flatter experience. In other words, to be more organically involved in the experience of the religion or the practice or the belief system, and to participate in the channeling of it, in the speaking of it, in the teaching of it, from this organic, internal high wisdom that we all possess. And so I think we're going to see maybe more study groups pop up, more circles. I know CSL does a circle group around the magazine now, which I think is brilliant. And you can bring those things online. The more access and in kind of smaller bouts, which helps flatten out the experience more, I think is really the trend of spiritual community. The people want to be in small groups. They want to be personal. They want to connect, and they want to speak the word, not just the minister always speaking the word. So I think that's where we're going to see New Thought kind of branch into, hopefully.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And that speaks to me. That speaks to what I always say about New Thought, which is, one of the things that attracted me, that it's not a religion, it's a way of life. And that is what people are trying to find, a way of life that allows the allness that there is to shine through, no matter what it looks like or where it comes from. And so
Yes.
in that kind of a model, you don't need to be a minister to have an insight. You don't need to be someone of a special whatever to teach a class, right? And so that way we begin to value people and move away from some of the titles and stuff, which creates a separation from the people. And it puts pressure on the people with the titles, because now they have this whole thing to live up to, and they can't
Right.
be authentic because they're trying to live into this thing, and it's like, let me out,
Nothing like ministerial burnout to change to shift the future. But
Right.
you guys remind me that Science of Mind magazine many years ago sold a baseball cap, and you can't get them anymore. But it had the magazine logo on the front, but on the back of the baseball cap, in very small letters, it said "A faith, a philosophy, a way of life." And I've always really held to that phrase, because there is nothing in there about community. There is nothing in there about religion. There is nothing in there about a church. There's nothing in there about a Sunday service. And they didn't come up with that. That's hardcore Science of Mind from the book, that we are a faith, a philosophy, and a way of life. So if we can look at that, then that means that it is entirely within ourselves to be this, and it can look like what we want it to look like for ourselves. It's nice to go to a community. It's nice to go to a church. It's great to hang out with friends on a Sunday morning and then go to coffee or whatever afterwards. But ultimately, if you have faith and you follow this philosophy, it becomes a way of life. Right. Is my experience.
Yeah. And by definition, if it becomes the way of life, all those other things shall be given unto thee. You will have a community. You will have a location, whatever you want to call it, to come in and exchange ideas and laugh and share and uplift, because it's a way of life. It's just what you do.
Yeah. Mitch, we kind of touched on this in the first segment a little bit as well, but from your perspective, with this idea of a faith, philosophy, and way of life, how does that support? How does New Thought, instead of us going into diverse communities, how does that and New Thought support what diverse communities are doing already?
Well, one of our main principles, I love going back to principle, is the oneness principle. And the more that we can live in to and practice oneness, I think is the challenge, because our humanness, right, that loves to pop up, wants to identify the other or what's different around us, and part of that is just kind of a survival technique of the brain, that this is different from me, and is this a threat, right? But our work in applying this principle of oneness is to transcend, to move through the discomfort of a seeming other, and reconnecting and living the law of oneness in our human journey. And the more we can achieve that, I think the more we're going to see this kind of drawing in, right? Because now we're making these deep and authentic connections based on principle.
Mm. And now, I know our dear brother Wayne is probably typing away furiously on his keyboard because he asked this question of all of our guests, and he asks it in a number of different programs. How exactly do we live oneness?
Yes. Well, one is just remembering that we're all cells in one body called humanity. And in our oneness, it is the collection of us that makes the oneness. I don't look at my hand and just say there's one cell here, and it's the whole hand, the whole body of humanity. So when we look through that lens of our consciousness, that this is part of my wholeness, my humanity, the wholeness of us, I think we make different decisions. We use different language. We have deeper empathy. We have a deeper desire to understand and connect and help and hold the reverence that the seeming other is from our human perspective, but we can transcend it knowing that's part of us. That's part of one in many different forms. So applying that lens and acting from that perspective, I think, is a very powerful way to do things. But we don't have that. Our first reaction to somebody different, especially if we don't have any programming around it, is one of withdrawal many times. If we don't understand what's going on with the seeming other, we separate because we think that's safety. But safety is really oneness, when everybody's part of us and we can have the freedom to connect and to heal and to grow together. That's where our net of safety is. It's not an othering or separation. That's an illusion. And we need to move through that illusion to embrace the oneness.
And quite frankly, when we sit down, and definitely for another human being, but we can go beyond that. But when I sit down and look at another human being and see they have two eyes and two ears and nose and a mouth and all the other appendages and organs, and there's a oneness that speaks there that says no matter what you look like, how tall, what color, what gender, there's a oneness there that not only is apparent, but it's interchangeable. We can do, I can do transplants. I can do all kinds of things to solidify this oneness that's going on. And so when we can begin to step into that, right? The oneness becomes very apparent, I believe. But we have to shed some ego and not that we need an ego because we need a personality, but that extraneous ego, we need to release that and the separation and pointing out all these little minute differences, but because at the core is one.
Yeah. Our dear friend Shay is saying inclusion is oneness, and absolutely, Shay, agree with you on that 100%. It's easy to fall into that otherness, that whether it's color or personal preferences or gender identification or sexual identity, it's easy to fall into an accusation or perspective that somebody's different, that they're other than. And but when we come back to that sense of inclusion, to me, I remember somebody said it yesterday, I think, on one of the programs. If you look at planet Earth from the space station, you don't see no borders. There's no borders out there. You can't tell the difference between a Jew and a Christian. You can't tell which guys are Muslim and which ones aren't. You can't tell who's got and so we're all part of this. When we can come from that perspective that everybody is a part of the game, everybody's on the playing field. Some might be playing the game in ways I'm not real happy about, but it doesn't mean that they're not part of what's happening on this planet. And our brother Wade also asked, do good for the greater.
Yeah.
To be doing good for the greater. And that's kind of one of our next places we'd love to explore with you a little bit, Mitch. We've got a group of questions here, folks, that we give people questions in advance so they can be prepared for them. And one of the ones Mitch wanted to jump into was how, from this perspective of oneness and inclusion, how can New Thought be an agent for greater good, a power for good in the world of health and wellness, and specifically healthcare and such. And I know that you said you'd like to explore that a little bit, so we'd love to hear some more of your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things I love about New Thought is New Thought really helps us understand right and constructive use of our minds. And we get a mind, but we don't get a handbook. and you get whatever your culture, your parents believed about thinking and thoughts and what's valuable and what to think and how to be. But what I do love, and that we're seeing now more in the scientific community, which is a different kind of religion, right, is proving how our mental state, our thoughts, our experiences, what we choose to focus our mind on affects our health. If you're scared, for instance, all of a sudden you have a scared feeling, your heart beats faster, right? There's a deep and intimate connection between our thoughts, our perceptions of what we believe about what's happened to us, and how our health and wellness plays out. I love the ACEs study that we've seen. If you've watched it on YouTube, it's called Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And when they did this study, what they found out was that adverse childhood experiences are the number one indicator of good or poor health. And the more adverse experiences you've had, the more likely your health is to be bad in later years. And that these experiences live in our bodies, but they don't have to. And the game changer to me is, how do we use our mind? How do we use the power of the mind, what we focus on, our spiritual principles and practices to heal those things that got embodied and are starting to manifest and play out in our health experience? And I believe that New Thought is primed, is in a perfect position to help us take that next step now that we know these experiences. That there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. I think CSL has a class on it now. And I think that's a great example of going down this road about what we can do about the score that's in our bodies that came through our mind. And now what do we do about that using our spiritual tools, practices, and what we focus on? So I think it's a great time for New Thought to do this.
Yeah. And again, it speaks right into the idea of a way of life.
Yes.
Once we begin to live a certain way of life, we're conscious about what we eat. We're conscious about the relationships we build. We're conscious about exercising our body and reading good material and watching good programs. And so again, as we begin to present this to the general public, if you will, as a faith, a philosophy, and a way of life, and then begin to actualize that in our own lives, these conversations are going to be a lot easier. The attraction, if you will, to this way of life will begin to be a lot easier, because a faith means I can walk without sight, right? A philosophy means there's a methodology. There is a way of looking at things to put them in right perspective. And then a way of life means I'm just incorporating this in my everyday beingness.
Oh yeah.
You guys are reminding me of I think this was Ernest Holmes that originally wrote this, and it's the definition of religious science. Religious science is a correlation of laws of science, opinions of philosophy, and the revelations of religion applied to human needs and aspirations.
That is.
And I'm thinking of specifically a couple of dear friends of ours that live in Florida that are nurses. And one is an emergency room nurse. She's a traveling emergency room nurse, and had a chance to share with her for quite a bit during the early days of the pandemic. Not knowing what was going on, she went out on the road and answered the call to serve as an emergency room nurse, and she ended up in New York City at the height of it all, when nobody knew what was going on, and they were literally storing bodies in refrigerator trucks out back because people were dying so rapidly. And one of the things she shared with me was that her faith, this philosophy, not only sustained her, but she didn't have to preach it. She wasn't out there teaching it. She was just living it, just being it, and being the demonstration of this. And that in itself was having a healing and curative effect for some people that still made their transition, but they were able to do it in a way with more dignity, with a deeper, with a sense that, and she knew that they were more at peace with it because of how she was showing up, because she was being the demonstration of this. It's important, folks. Everyone can make a difference.
There is a feeling, there is an energy, there is a vibration when someone is living the authentic life, and you don't have to say anything. It's recognizable. And when that begins to be the dominant vibration that everybody is sending throughout the universe, things will change overnight.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
That I got a feeling that's coming back around when we get to final thoughts, but we're not there yet. So we'll get there eventually. Mitch, let's change just a little bit. From your perspective, someone comes to you and wants to know more. Someone really wants to deepen their experience of this, and they want to know more. What advice do you offer? Where do you point people? Where do you suggest people get started if they're just beginning to explore this?
Well, oftentimes we turn to literature, different books and programs. But what I would encourage people, for whatever journey, whatever pathway they want to go on, whether they want to read a book or get involved in a program or go to a particular spiritual community, which are all ways to get information. But what I really love is what Ernest Holmes encouraged in his Science of Mind book, which is kind of an entry book into New Thought through his lens. And what he said, and I strongly encourage anyone on this journey, is to prove the principle, prove the practice, prove the teaching, like get it into your being in a way that you understand it. And not so much just taking what's being said or what you're reading at face value. If thoughts are things and there's a power for good, demonstrate it. Start to use some of these practices for yourself. I love that Pam Grout has written 2 books that really help you do this in a very specific, almost scientific way. Her E squared book, which is energy squared, and her E cubed. And all of them contain experiments where you can now start to have a very one-on-one kind of experience with the higher power, with the presence, with the thing itself, as Ernest Holmes would say, and demonstrate it. Begin to learn the gears of your metaphysical bicycle. How do the handlebars work? How do I steer my mind? How do I steer this thing? How do I pedal it? How do I get momentum using this power for good? And start it to embody it. Don't just listen. Don't just learn, but have an experience so that you begin to have an knowing, an experience of it that goes organically. It's a very different thing to know how to ride a bike and to ride it. 2 different things entirely. And when you do ride it, you really know it.
Yeah. And I would imagine that heading over to your website would be a good place to start a journey as well. So tell us a little bit about your site, and we're going to pop it up on the screen here for everybody to see. The web, it's going across on the bottom of your screen there, folks. So walk us through here. What are we going to find when we head over to your website, Mitch?
So it's spirituallyspeakingwithmitch.com. I have another website that I'm transitioning to because my business name is Speak, Teach, Inspire. So I am moving into that direction. But for now, you can head on over to spirituallyspeakingwithmitch.com. And one of the kind of places I like to take people is to develop a relationship with your inner critic, right? Because we have more than one voice inside. We have the observer self, and we have this inner critic, which is the voice of the world. And there's actually 7 types of inner critic. I know one's bad enough, but there are actually 7 types. And I do a workshop around this, but if you click on the little double face button there, you'll go into a survey that you can take. And at the end, it's going to give you scores for each of the 7 types. And your top scores are your tendencies for your internal dialogue. And why is that important? Because thoughts are things. And when we begin to understand more about our internal dialogue, we can make different decisions. We can see that as a separate voice. And we can begin to understand that this inner critic part of ourselves, it's just trying to keep us safe. It's just trying to help us play by the rules of the world. But when it gets into the lane, our dreams, our hopes, our goals, it's out of bounds. It doesn't want you to go there. Yeah. But I hope you take the survey, shoot me a little message, let me know what type yours is. I would love to know what type you have. And if you have any questions, completely happy to support you around that subject as a little way to get going here.
Yeah. All right. And
I will be taking it.
Yes. I plan to take it on as well. It looks like it doesn't look like it's going to take that long either, folks. This doesn't look like it's a big, huge, heavy exam. And you get to know yourself a bit better. And everything you're going to need is right there. Now, I'm sure you'll want to connect with Mitch as far as helping to decipher the information that you get. And I know you offer coaching programs and stuff like that as well. All that stuff's on the website. We've dropped a link in the comments. If it's not there, grab it as it goes across on the bottom of your screen. But pretty easy to remember, Spiritually Speaking with Mitch.
Yeah.
Pretty good. All right. We need to take another break and say thank you to our sponsors and let some of our other donors say hello as well. However, don't go away, folks. We're going to be right back. We've got our final thoughts coming up in just a moment. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more on New Thought Today in just a moment. Stay with us. Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors and donors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Spiritual Center, Kitchener, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Center for Spiritual Living, North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, Center for Spiritual Living, Seattle, and all of our individual donors and sponsors. Thank you for being a part of the New Thought Media Network. Please come be you. And we're back with more of New Thought Today here on the New Thought Media Network. Folks, thanks for being with us today. I do want to remind you, if you have something you would like us to talk about, or you have a suggestion for our program, send us an email, ministertalk@ntmedia.org. Rev Brz or myself will get back with you. Or if you'd like to be a guest on the program, let us know that. Again, the same email, ministertalk@ntmedia.org. And if you'd like to join our family and be a part of what we're doing here and bringing this message across the planet, please consider making a donation over at our website, ntmedia.org/donate. We'll be sure to get your name or your organization on the next version of our thank you video. All right. So we're at that point of the day where we call for final thoughts. And normally I let Elzia go first. But then he and whoever our guest is take all the good stuff, and I'm left trying to make something up. So today I'm going to go first with our final thoughts. And I think the biggest thing for me is that, and what I've gained from this conversation today is, with 7-8 billion different people on the planet, there's 8 billion different ways to get to know God. But the formula is simple. We listen, we practice, and we live, and we be that. We live the philosophy. We become a living demonstration of this, of what we believe, and how we do it in the world. Shea Bird said it real well is also, I am the living demonstration of these practices. So that's for me. Mitch, how about for you? Final thoughts.
No, I agree with the living demonstration. In fact, I grew up science of mind. My mother believed in it deeply. So I'd come to her with a problem and she'd go, if there's a will, there's a way. And then I'd come to her with something else. She'd go, mind over matter. Like I didn't know. I just lived it, And what if more of our youth were just living it? Like that's just what you do. You just lean into your power, your resilience, your higher power, this higher order of being. So I love this idea of bringing it into our life practice, make it part of the water so we can just drink it in.
Yeah. And I think for me, I'm gonna go out here and bring in a song from Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell.
Hey.
And that song is There Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing. So just go out and be the real thing, which is to be yourself, to be authentic. And this other stuff will begin to percolate, if you will, out of you, because that's who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And when we do that, we understand that it's mind over matter. If there's a will, there's a way, and that this is a way of life. And so, boom, when we can just sing that song in the back of our mind, ain't nothing like the real thing. And I put heaven at your feet and flowers where you walk, and just hold that image from Marvin and Tammy. As they say, everything's gonna be all right.
There we go. All right. Now I got to go get on YouTube and go pull that up. Do a little dancing for the afternoon.
Yes.
So thank you for that, Z. And everyone out there watching, thank you for being a part of what we're doing here. Please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends what we're doing, and come back and join us again next week when we will have the very esteemed Reverend Dr. David Ault as our special guest. I can guarantee you there'll be wisdom drops every 20 seconds or so when we're talking with Reverend Dr. David Ault. So until then, we love you and we wish you peace and richest blessings. Bye now.